Perhaps the biggest news story of the season dropped earlier this week. At the end of this season, Chip Ganassi Racing will be leaving NASCAR and Trackhouse is taken over. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Back in my studio for a quick pit stop before I hop on a plane and head to Road America later today. I'll be there all weekend long for the Jockey Made in America 250 weekend. I cannot wait. Not my first time seeing a race in Wisconsin, but it is my first time at Road America, so I can't wait to experience it firsthand. And I've still got at least one more video to edit from my recent travel adventures, but we'll be in Road America this weekend. Today, though, we've got a huge news story to catch up on. I know I'm behind by a day or so. I was out of town, important stuff going on with family, but I'm back and we're here to talk about all things Trackhouse, all things Chip Ganassi Racing in just a moment. First, this episode is sponsored by our friends at Avalon King, makers of Armor Shield 9. I've told you about this amazing product before. Armor Shield 9 is the highest rated do-it-yourself ceramic coating on the planet. Check out this sleek packaging it comes in. I put it on my car and then I just drove that thing across the country and back, and let me tell you, the stuff really works. Armor Shield 9 rejects UV rays, surface scratches, road grime, mud, pollen, acid rain, and much, much more. Whatever the world may throw at your car. Raindrops, things like that just glide right across the surface, so it really does make a difference. That's Armor Shield 9, produced by Avalon King. They were kind enough to send me a sample. Really appreciate that. That's Armor Shield 9 from Avalon King. Their link is down in the description below. Be sure to check it out for yourself. Wednesday afternoon, the NASCAR world was shaken to its very core. Out at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, where I was at just a few days before, Trackhouse made a crazy announcement. Trackhouse, the team founded by Justin Marks, co-owned by Pitbull, announced that they will purchase all of Chip Ganassi Racing's assets as soon as the 2021 season ends. The deal is done. Chip Ganassi is bowing out of NASCAR after this season, after over 20 years of competing, and Trackhouse will take over everything. That includes both of Chip Ganassi Racing's charters. You'll remember that Trackhouse is leasing their charter this year from Spire, and you'll remember a few weeks back, Spire sold that charter to Colleague for next season. So as of last week, Trackhouse had no charter for next season. Now they have two that they're getting from Chip Ganassi Racing, so they're buying both charters. Also included in this deal is all of Chip Ganassi Racing's equipment and Chip Ganassi Racing's race shop in Concord, North Carolina. Whew, catch your breath for just a moment. Now we'll talk about what this means for Ganassi, especially what this means for Trackhouse. We'll also talk about their dramatic driver situation in a moment, but first, just to get the details out of the way so you all know exactly what's going down here. While it was announced earlier this week, the deal will not become official until immediately following the final NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix in November. And Chip Ganassi was actually present at this press conference the other day, and he actually said that, a couple months ago, he had no intentions whatsoever of selling his NASCAR Cup Series team until Justin Marks came to him and made an offer that, according to Chip Ganassi, he just couldn't refuse. So that's right, discussions between the two began less than a couple of months ago. Can you believe that? And speaking of short time frames, according to multiple sources, most of Chip Ganassi Racing did not know about this deal until maybe a few days, or in some cases a few hours, in a couple of cases from people I've talked to, several minutes before it was announced publicly. Ross Chastain and Kurt Busch were not informed of this deal until the day it was announced. So boy, oh boy, Chip Ganassi and Trackhouse were able to keep these negotiations pretty darn quiet for a long period of time. That is uncharacteristic for the NASCAR garage. Now, a couple other things. I mentioned that Trackhouse is purchasing Chip Ganassi Racing's race shop in North Carolina. Trackhouse, Justin Marks especially, has talked about the team's intentions of moving their operations to Nashville in the next few years. Their parent company, Trackhouse Entertainment, is based in Nashville, but as far as next season is concerned, Trackhouse will still operate out of North Carolina. They will move into the Chip Ganassi Racing shop next season. They've been working closely with Richard Childress Racing this year, and according to Bob Pockris, they're still talking about what a potential alliance next year will look like between the two. Trackhouse won't be working out of the RCR shop next season, so we'll see what kind of alliance continues. I do think that RCR Alliance has helped them a lot this year. I think more than anything that ECR Hendrick, the Chevy Engines Alliance, Chevy across the board is faster this year. I think that's probably helped the most, but keeping closest ties to RCR, I think, will be in Trackhouse Trackhouse's best interest next season, but we'll see what develops there. And then lastly, while Chip Ganassi Racing will be exiting NASCAR after this season, that does not mean he's quitting motorsports. No. He is still going to be involved in IndyCar, IMSA, and other racing series across the board. His NASCAR team is the only Chip Ganassi team shutting down this season, so that is a lot. I know most of y'all have had a day or so to kind of digest this information, but still, when you kind of unpack it all like that, it's a lot. It's not something anyone saw coming at the beginning of this year, that's for sure. We'll talk about Trackhouse, Daniel Suarez, and that second driver lineup they still have to fill in just a moment. But first, Chip Ganassi Racing. Chip Ganassi, man, he's been involved in the NASCAR Cup Series since before I was a fan. I have not known a NASCAR without Chip Ganassi Racing on track. Chip Ganassi got into the NASCAR Cup Series all the way back in 2001 when he became the majority owner of Felix Sabati's team. And in the past 20 plus years or so, they've had a couple shining moments, especially 2010 when Jamie McMurray won the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400, 2 crown jewels in the same year. But aside from a few glimpses of brilliance, Chip Ganassi has never quite found his footing in NASCAR. They have 14 wins total across, again, more than 20 Cup Series seasons. Compared to Chip Ganassi Racing's other motorsports efforts, his NASCAR team has always fallen a bit flat. I mean, the dude has won 4 Indy 500s, he's won a bunch of open wheel racing titles, he's won a bunch of Rolex 24s, he's won a ton of major motorsports events and series championships, but NASCAR, he's known for his catchphrase, "I like winners." Unfortunately, they just never won much in NASCAR. Kyle Larson has nearly half of Chip Ganassi Racing's total NASCAR Cup Series wins, 6 out of the 14. They've had their moments, and of course they're going to continue to compete this season, and Kurt Busch currently is inside the top 16 in points, looking at making the playoffs for the 3rd straight year in that car, and Ross Chastain isn't too far behind. He's not completely out of contention just yet. So the team will hopefully go out swinging this year. We'll see what Kurt Busch and Ross Chastain can do here in the second half of the 2021 season, but that's right, Chip Ganassi, he will be gone. He will no longer be seen in the NASCAR garage area after this weekend, which, maybe is for the best. I think Chip Ganassi's heart has always been in open wheel racing and other forms of racing. That's where he's had the most success. Chip Ganassi seems like the kind of guy who likes to win. And when he's not winning, he's not having much fun. You see him at the IndyCar track far more often than you see him out at a NASCAR race, because I think he knows where his bread is buttered. He knows where his championships will be won. He knows where the biggest races will be won. He's over there in IndyCar more often than not. Now he is fully free to spend most of his time out in open wheel racing, sports car racing, wherever else he wants to be. He's just never quite had the same success in stock car racing that he's had everywhere else. So I think with the charter system in place and with charters going for upwards of $10 million each, as Dale Jr. and others in the industry have speculated recently, now's the time to do it. I mean, we don't know exactly what Trackhouse offered him, but again, Chip Ganassi said it was an offer he, quote, couldn't refuse, so it must have been a pretty penny. Now's the time to do it. You don't have to invest in all new equipment next year with the next gen car. You've got 2 very valuable charters at your disposal. If you're at all thinking about getting out of NASCAR, this is the year to do it. I mean, at the same time, it's also the year to get into NASCAR, but if you're Chip Ganassi and you have other motorsports teams that are dominating their respective series, I don't blame you for wanting to put your focus over in that direction. Now let's focus on Trackhouse, because Trackhouse is making a huge investment right now. Trackhouse is by far the most interesting team in NASCAR right now. They're not the fastest by any means, they're not the biggest by any means either, but somehow they continue to grab headlines week after week after week. They're one of the most fun teams to root for on a weekly basis, with Daniel Suarez exceeding expectations on the racetrack, leading a bunch of laps at Bristol Dirt, sitting 18th in points right now, right there on the cusp of making the playoffs. This is a brand new team. Brand new race teams in NASCAR should not be contending for playoff spots, especially when, Daniel Suarez, a journeyman driver, we can call him that, right? This is like his 4th team in 5 years. He's kind of a journeyman driver, has never quite found his footing in the Cup Series. Who would have thunk arguably his best season in Cup Series to date would have come with a brand new team, Trackhouse Racing. That's what we've seen this year. So they've been fun to watch. They've been extremely interesting off the track. But is this investment a smart investment if you're Trackhouse? I don't know exactly what they spent on, those 2 charters, all that equipment, the shop space. I imagine it was a lot of money. Again, charters are expected to be going for close to $10 million these days. Dale Earnhardt Jr. explained the charter system really well recently on his show. And he kind of came out in support of the charter system. He admitted that, the charter system and the high upfront costs associated with acquiring a charter, he admitted that they're kind of keeping Junior Motorsports from going Cup Series racing. They don't have the money in their budget to spend $10+ million on one charter, per charter. But in the same breath, Dale Jr. was highly complimentary of of the charter system. He came out in support of the charter system, it sounded like.
Man, that's a great thing. The fact that the charters are going up in value just as we speak, that is exactly what they intended. 10 years ago, if you wanted to sell your team, you had nothing to sell but parts and cars and pieces that are going to be sold for pennies on the dollar. That was it. When you got out, you really took a loss.
Compare that to today. I mean, if you're a team that's forced to shut down, you have an extremely valuable asset in that charter, which is basically just a title. It's basically a slip of paper. These days, charters are appreciating in value as demand for them has continued to go up year after year. And I think with the next gen car, we could continue to see significant demand for charters. So now if you're a team who's thinking of closing up shop, you have something that you can sell and make real money on. So you're not just completely SOL, out of luck if you shut down. You have something of value that other investors, other race teams want. And that's what Dale Jr. is kind of pointing out there in those comments. And so while yes, the charter system does present some barriers to entry here and there, and I don't like that it artificially condenses the size of the field. You really can only have 36 truly competitive cars each week, each season. You can have a few non-charter teams, but it's really hard to do that. It's much easier if you have a charter with all the guaranteed money and things associated with it. So while there are a lot of barriers that the charter system creates, there is, again, that stability that it creates for those who have charters that is extremely valuable to these race teams and keeps especially the biggest and most competitive race teams, I think, fairly happy, especially when those charter values are going up year after year after year, as they have been recently. So if you're a Trackhouse, I don't know what you spent on those charters. Let's say they spent $20 million on 2 charters, $10 million each. Let's say that's what they spent. Hey, at the rate things are going, in the next 2 or 3 years, those $10 million piece charters possibly be worth $15 to $20 million, the way things are going, especially if the next gen car and the business model associated with it actually turns out to be successful. If new manufacturers come into the sport, and we continue to hear rumors week in, week out that NASCAR's close to a deal with maybe one new manufacturer, if the next gen car succeeds in its mission, if it manages to make owning a competitive NASCAR Cup Series team significantly cheaper than it is today and has been for years, then I think any sort of investment you make today, I mean, obviously there's a limit to what you should be willing to spend, but I think any investment today is going to pan out at least over the next 5 to 10 years. Trackhouse is taking a big risk here. Justin Marks, Ty Norris, Pitbull, sorry, they're taking a risk here. But this tells me they have the utmost confidence in NASCAR, its near and long-term future, the next gen car, what tracks, what markets they're going after, the business itself, new manufacturers. This tells me that Trackhouse is extremely confident. Now, is that confidence maybe misguided? Are they maybe overconfident? That remains to be seen, but they're clearly confident. Confident to the point that they're willing to spend tens of millions of dollars, if not, $100 million. I don't know what they spent on this acquisition. I mean, they're absorbing a whole race team. Goodness gracious. I don't know what they spent, but it was a lot of money, which implies they are very, very confident. Hopefully that confidence is well placed. But that's what I'm saying, y'all. Trackhouse is the most interesting team in stock car racing right now. Justin Marks is only 40 years old. It's great that we have a younger team owner with new lofty ideas for his team, expanding their presence in the sport. Pitbull, of course, is a co-owner. Ty Norris, who's been around for many, many years, is heavily involved with the team, helping run operations over there. The combo of Daniel Suarez and Pitbull have been great brand ambassadors for NASCAR this season. Daniel Suarez is having a great season on the racetrack as well. Again, I think exceeding expectations almost entirely across the board. And I really love the idea Marks has to bring Trackhouse to downtown Nashville. That's what he wants to do in the next few years, is open up a shop in downtown Nashville, create sort of a tourist NASCAR shop experience destination there. He talked about opening like a bar attached to the shop. It just fit right in with that Nashville, Tennessee culture. I love the idea. Who knows if it works out, but I love the idea. You don't see Joe Gibbs, Hendrick Motorsports, Team Penske thinking of things like this. I mean, who knows? Maybe none of this will pan out and Trackhouse will flame out of the sport in the next 5 years. I'm confident that they know what they're doing, but there is risk associated with it. But hey, risks are interesting. That's what makes this thing engaging. That's why Trackhouse is the most interesting team in the sport today, because they're the one team right now taking huge, huge risks. It's a total unknown. What will Trackhouse look like in 5 years, 10 years, even 2 years, honestly? Next year, actually, when we talk about drivers and what their driver lineup will look like, who knows if this will pan out for Trackhouse, but their confidence is clear. Anyway, the team is super interesting. I'm rooting for them all the way. We have to talk about their driver situation, because that's one thing I haven't mentioned yet. They did confirm during that press conference on Wednesday that Daniel Suarez will stick with the team next year. He'll continue to race for Trackhouse, but now they have that second charter. So they will run a second full-time car next year, but who that driver will be remains to be seen. Justin Marks admitted during the press conference that Ross Chastain and Kurt Busch, the two current Chip Ganassi drivers, are at the top of their list, but nothing is confirmed just yet. And there are still many other free agents out on the market. Veterans like Ryan Newman, Eric Almirola, still technically in a contract year. Matt DiBenedetto's future is still not secure. Ryan Preece has had some moments at JTG this season. There are several other options they could go with, but if you ask me, I think they will end up picking either Chastain or Kurt Busch. To me, if I'm Trackhouse, the first person I'm calling is Kurt Busch. I think he's the best driver available right now. Yes, he's one of the older drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series. Maybe he only has a couple more, good years in him, but he's been able to win in Chip Ganassi equipment the last 2 seasons, made it to the round of 8 in the playoffs last season. He's worthy of a phone call. Now, I don't think Trackhouse is Kurt Busch's first option. According to multiple reports, I think if 2311 Racing is able to secure a second charter, I think Kurt Busch will likely go to 2311. But if 2311 can't get a charter, maybe he'll take a look at Trackhouse. But that's why I think you got to get him on the phone ASAP to see if you can maybe get some sort of commitment or hear about where 2311 is at in their process. Again, I think Kurt Busch is the best free agent. He's the most talented free agent available, and he likely comes with at least a little bit of sponsorship. I think Monster Energy will stick with him, at least in some capacity. So it's a win-win if you get Kurt Busch to join your team. Now, I think Ross Chastain has a really good shot as well, and honestly, he probably would be my second choice, given that list of drivers I just sort of rattled off. I think Ross Chastain is really talented, and he was on a really good roll the last few weeks until Pocono. Just, things did not go well for him at Pocono, but he was riding high, finishing second at Nashville the week before. Yes, he's outside the top 20 in points, but he's been running better lately. He does have 2 top 5s this year, which is actually double what Kurt Busch has. Kurt is higher up in points, been more consistent, but he only has 1 top 5 this season, so give Chastain some credit there. You gotta feel bad for Ross Chastain, man. Thought he finally had found some stability, taking all this time to get to Chip Ganassi after the DC Solar fiasco from a couple of years back. He finally gets an opportunity to drive the 42 car full time, and this season's been up and down, but it seems to be going the right direction, and now you have the rug pulled out from under you. Again, according to reports, Ross Chastain did not know about this acquisition, did not know he was going to become a de facto free agent until the same day the announcement was made, until this week. So poor Ross Chastain, man, blindsided yet again, just out of his control. While I think Kurt Busch should be Trackhouse's first option, I kind of hope Ross Chastain lands that ride. I really hope he stays with Chevy, with Trackhouse next season. I kind of want to see Kurt Busch go over to 2311. I want to see him join Toyota, sort of become affiliate teammates with his younger brother, Kyle Busch. I think that would be really cool. So I hope Kurt gets that ride, and I hope Chastain goes to Trackhouse and stays with his Chevy. Maybe even stays in the 42. I don't know what they'll brand it. Because while Ross Chastain is still prone to making, over-aggressive mistakes from time to time on the racetrack, he looks jittery sometimes in the pack. You can always spot that car because it's the one ducking down to the apron trying to take someone 3 wide more often than not. But despite some of those aggressive tendencies, the guy can wheel a race car. And he's a great story. He's a driver who really earned every opportunity he got. I really love the humble beginnings sort of backstory. A watermelon farmer from Florida chasing his big league racing dream, and he's made the most of his opportunities. So I hope Chastain keeps that ride, and I hope Kurt goes to 2311, because then you got 2 young driver, veteran driver, both in pretty competitive race cars next season. I think that's good for the sport, and I think that's fun for us to watch at home on TV. But again, if I'm Trackhouse, selfishly, you got to go for Kurt Busch first. I feel like Kurt Busch has his eyes closely set on 2311, but things can change. You might land him. But if Kurt Busch doesn't work out, I hope Ross Chastain lands there. I asked you guys on YouTube, actually, the day all this news broke, who you think will land that second Trackhouse car. And you can see by this poll, a lot of Ross Chastain fans, or just a lot of y'all expecting Chastain to get the phone call at the end of the day here. I appreciate all of you voting on that. But now leave a comment down below. Who do you think gets that second Trackhouse ride? Do you think it's Kurt Busch? Do you think it's Ross Chastain? Do you think it's somebody completely different? Maybe not even someone I mentioned in this episode. Let me know down in the comments below. But that's all I've got. Finally got around this week to discussing the big news. A huge news story for sure. Trackhouse is the most interesting team in NASCAR. I cannot wait to see how their 2022 and beyond plans continue to develop. But that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. Gotta catch a flight up to Wisconsin here shortly, so I will be on the road. I'll be at Road America this weekend. If you see me at the track, feel free to come say hi. I'm planning to film some stuff, but I'm not entirely sure what kind of access I may or may not have, so we'll see what comes out of it. I'll see you guys again at the end of this weekend, and of course next week I'll be back in my studio full-time for most of the rest of the summer. I got some plans later in the summer that I'm excited about. I'll share those with you shortly, but thank you all for the support. I will see you at the racetrack. Have a great weekend.